Years ago, when I was teaching at the University of Maine at Machias, I was the philosophy department, and I taught philosophy and ethics there. And one question we had always as we were thinking about critical thinking was, must we mean what we say? Must we mean what we say? It was very interesting for a number of classes, and it was a broadcast course, so people out there in the broadcast land, to think about propaganda versus reality or the right way of thinking. Can we discern that? At that time, we could, and it was sort of like what it was what the writer was hoping that the Corinthians would inspire amongst themselves. That is, there's a lot of thinking and faith remarks that go into anything that we can do. And so we know that we think, we pray, we believe, and we offer something in talking to each other, and then in talking to each other, we do something. I noticed this morning on the way in, a couple of people working on the flower beds. They were really working nicely together because they were quite a ways apart, so they didn't have to talk to each other. That's always nice to do when you're working in a garden, I think. And they were being very, very kind of observant about what they were doing. They were cutting here, cutting there, and making it look beautiful for us when we came in this morning. That's a remark that comes from belief and faith, I believe. And must we mean what we say? Yes, we can see by the way they handle themselves and the tools that they use and the way in which the flowers are created with some help. We can see that. And we can see that that's all of God. It's remarkable, I think. And you and I know that. We know what that looks like. And even if you didn't look at the flowers and see somebody doing that, you can see that because it comes out of a strong belief that the person or people have. There are places throughout the Scripture that suggest the same thing. And so what I'm going to suggest today is that when we think about, and I want to make a shift here from the work that everybody has to mean what they say. We all have to mean what we say. If we don't mean what we say, why do we bother saying it? Why talk? Do we just talk because we like to hear ourselves talk or hear somebody else talk? And we don't mean it? I really don't enjoy that very much. You know, we can call it BS. We can call it a lie. We can call it unfortunate exclamations. Must we mean what we say? If you remember the Coneheads a long time ago, the Coneheads were out there. They usually said what they meant, and they called themselves. I'm trying to think that what that is through, but they called themselves a parental unit. They didn't call themselves fathers or mothers or aunts or uncles or whatever. They were parental units. I thought that was rather funny. Until the Episcopal Church later on had something in the parochial report that said parental units, how many parental units you have. And I thought that was hilarious. I hope we still have it. I don't know. I haven't looked at a parochial report in a long time. But the point is, when we think about Father's Day, I want to talk about Father's Day because it's an important time. It's an important time for men who happen to be fathers, I think. And even men who aren't fathers. And I think that we have to broaden, we have to really make broad stroke here. Who is a father? There are lots of people, who maybe 50 years ago would not have been considered a father, who are fathers today. not just stepfathers, but uncles or great uncles or grandparents or grandfathers or whatever, that did take care if the father was dead or incompetent. But they're people that see themselves as fathers, and that's who they are. And it's remarkable, and it's just wonderful. So I want to talk about my father was my biological father. He was a really interesting guy. I didn't realize how interesting he was until after he died. That's kind of the way, isn't it? You don't know people until they're dead. It's like, oh God. But he was interesting in a lot of ways. I mean, I knew he was interesting in a lot of ways for the opportunities I had with him. When he was 17, he decided that the war couldn't go on without him, and he got my grandmother to sign off, and he went to war. He was on a plane. He was in the Army Air Corps. In a plane and bombing North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. Lots of times he did that. He never talked about the war with anybody, as far as I can tell. Came back from the war. He had a good friend, Karki, who was in the South Pacific, fought in the South Pacific, and they said, this is we can't go back to life as it is now. We're not really in the mood for celebrating, I gather, according to my grandmother. So they headed for Florida. And they went to Florida and they rented a houseboat and they built a golf course for a year. Worked on a golf course for a year. I've worked with a lot of vets. I've worked with a lot of people connected with the Army. And I really wish everybody could have that opportunity. That would be a way to begin to look at one's life in a different way, and PTSD in another way, PTSD in another way. It's a way of working. He did that. He came back. He got married. I turned up, but he always liked to do something, a little edgy every year. And he had a friend who had a small plane, a Piper Cub, and it was on floats. And he'd come up and pick my father up when the ice went out of some of the big lakes up north. And they'd go up north, and they'd camp out and fish off the pontoons. And then he'd come back with a few fish, and life went on. And it was a good he liked that. I mean, it was very good, and I can understand that, having some of those experiences. Well, this one time, they got caught in a snowstorm on Chamberlain Lake. And if you've ever been to Chamberlain Lake, it's a big lake. It's like 9 miles long, maybe 4 miles wide. It's a rough lake. When the storms, it stormed, winter storm for 3 days. They camped out 3 days, and then they were able to get an opening, and they went over to. I heard this from the Nugents. They went over to the Nugents camps. Some of you may have been there or known Patty now. And they taxied in, and Nuge was there, and they took him up, and they got food and warmed up, and they didn't have any camps because all the sports were in the camps, but they said you could stay in the guides camps, so they stayed in the guides camps, and that's how they started going up there every year for a lot of years, maybe 30, 40 years, until Patty and Nuge died. But what worked out for them was, that the loving kindness of the Nugents, put them in a position where Brad, my father's friend, who had a sawmill, could help Nuge with the sawmill, and my father could act like a guide. She thought it was sort of silly, and found out where there were some fish, and then they caught them. They had a good time. Well, I come into this when I was 6 years old. And my father decided it would be a good experience for me to go up there. And so at 6 years old, I got in the back with him and Brad, and we flew up there, and I got sick most of the way. And we sat down in a lot of places. And, anyway, the whole point of this, and I don't want to beleaguer this, because I want to tell 3 stories about my father, is that he opened up to me, without saying anything, a whole new way of life. A way of life of guides and bear cubs and deer that you could go out and touch, and other stuff, and really nice people. I mean, really nice people. You know, those are so when we think about, and I was going to use that song, the thing from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. This was the good. You know, this was the good. This is really good. And there are other things my father would do, and he'd say, like if we were hunting and we'd finish hunting and it was getting rainy, and it was like 9, maybe 10. He'd say, you know, I want to show you something you've never seen. Okay. So we were in Denmark, Maine, where my grandmother lived. We rode to Hiram, and there was a dirt road, and we went down the dirt road, and then there was another dirt road, and it had a sign on it that said abattoir, which is, you know, a place where they kill things. I didn't know that. So we went in, and it was hot, and there was a boiling vat and a cauldron bigger than any witch's cauldron you would ever see. Huge, big as that. And there was a sow, big sow in there, pig in there, and it was like boiling up. And there was a guy that had maybe one tooth with no shoes. And he was laying on the sow, scraping the bristles off with a razor. I'd never seen anything like that. We talked a little bit about hell last week. And it's funny, I didn't think about it as hell. I just thought, this is really too bad that this guy doesn't have any shoes. Yeah, that was the first thing I thought about. This guy doesn't have any shoes. That's weird. So anyway, my father, we talked with him. And turned out these were business people for my father. He wrote insurance, and they did a kind of mutual fund together, made money for him, for these guys. So these guys were really happy to see him, and I was happy to see him on Thanksgiving Day. You know, this is remarkable. And so we, you know, I had some treats there as a kid, and they put together a box for my grandmother, and life goes on. You know, these are the kinds of experiences that if you've had as children, they stick with you, you do, and you end up having those experiences with your own children. It often works that way. I had friends in high school who, because of their sexual orientation, remember this is back in the 60s, because of their sexual orientation, people didn't like them very much. In fact, there are two of my friends whose parents kicked them out of the house. Bad parents. Kicked them out of the house. And I told my father that, my mother that, and I said, you know, I just don't get it. And we all got it. You know, we all understood why. But could you do that to your own son? So for 3 years, when I was a sophomore, junior, and senior in high school, we had somebody living with us in the basement because they couldn't live with their parents because their father kicked them out. And their fathers were very professional people, rich people, people that you would know if you lived in Bangor any length of time. I really had a hard time with that. Anyway, things worked out. They went to college. One went to college. One went to New Orleans to meet with an aunt. And I don't know. I remember what the other guy did. I think he went to college eventually. It's like, this is bad. This is bad. This is the ugly side of parenthood. Being a father. What father kicks his son out because he has a different sexual orientation? I have nothing. I have nothing. And when we're trying to do that, you're trying to meet that person with loving kindness, and I had a really hard time doing that when I'd see him around. When I'd see this guy's father around town. And eventually my father went over and talked with him and said, you know, maybe we can make some adjustments here and you know, it'd be better than him being with you than us, blah, 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 blah. No, that was it. So that's life. You just never know what life is going to deal you, right? You don't know who's going to show up at your door. And I hope that we all have decided that it's worthwhile to open our doors, whether the people are, whatever the people's sexual orientation, and we haven't. I think we're still a little off on that. gather. There's a lot of horrible things that happen to kids in the world because of fathers. And I didn't want to really mention a lot of that today. We know what that stuff is. It's horrible. I used to work with guys that had done all these horrible things. There's no remorse. There's no saying I'm sorry. It's just I did it, and I would do it again if I could. That's it. Okay, well, that's the way it is, buddy. That's the way you want it. That's the way it's going to be. There's a guy in Cherryfield. I lived in Cherryfield, the family in Cherryfield. Nice family, nice bunch of people. I liked them. I liked their kids. They came to Cub Scouts. One of my kids called it Chub Scouts because everybody seemed overweight. It's like, all these Cub Scouts supposed to be healthy and they're all overweight. But anyway, they had this racing thing. You may have been part of that if you have a Cub Scout. And every year they do a Pinewood Derby racing. And it's very cool because the kids and fathers pull this together and see who's got the fastest wooden car. Right and towards the end of this thing, there's like the screeching going on. And it's the mother of one of these kids, and she's screeching at her husband. I mean, really screeching, like everybody stopped. And they went out, and it's really embarrassing for everybody. It's like, the kids could like, figure out what's going on. A lot of them never heard that stuff, some of them had. So we found out down the road, here's the situation. This is a stepdaughter. He's got a stepdaughter. The guy's got father of this little kid. He's got a stepdaughter, and he's been sexually molesting her for a lot of years. He's got a lot of money. And the girl, she was a girl then when she turned 18. I think it was when she turned 18. She didn't press criminal charges against him. And we all wondered why she didn't do that. Well, she didn't do that because she knew if she pressed if she pressed criminal charges, she couldn't press a lawsuit. So she ended up getting like $1.2 million or something from her stepfather. I never feel like money is enough, but I think she did the right thing. That didn't bother him. He still got his business. His business is still going. It's like no problem. That's the problem. He's a rich guy. So Father's Day, for a lot of people is a really happy day. I mean, I certainly miss my father. Had a lot of good experiences. We had a lot of good times. But for some people, it's not a good day. It's not a good day. And I think we have to appreciate that. And we have to hold them, as the Corinthians people say, with loving kindness. And to bring them closer to us, wherever we can anticipate and address their pain, if at all possible. And sometimes that means we have to address our own pain, as you know. Well, the good times and bad times, right? I'll just leave you with a good time. My father had a business trip in Europe, so we went to Switzerland. We were in Amsterdam. My father said, let's go take a little walk. So we took a little walk down to the red light district, and I don't know how you feel about sex workers or whatever, but it's unique in Holland, and I lived for a year in France, and it seems to me sometimes it's more realistic. I think that in many ways. My father said, look at this. We walked through and saw a bunch of women. A couple men, and he said, I don't want to kind of judge you in any way. I don't want to kind of put this out for any way. I don't want to try to coerce you to do anything in any way. But this is available rather than your girlfriend becoming pregnant. I hadn't thought about that at all. You know, it's better. It was the same right then in that time, in the mid-60s, as it is right now. As far as anybody gets pregnant, it's very hard to get an abortion. I mean, it didn't have to go that way. But I got what he was saying. You know, we may not have to make those decisions if we make other decisions. And what are other decisions? So it's kind of silly. I mean, it's like he wanted me to see things. He wanted me to see that. He wanted me to see what was behind the Iron Curtain. And that was the scariest, one of the scariest things I've ever done. So if you have a father like that, you know, you're really lucky, I think. If you have somebody who's willing to just not say a lot about, you know, values, but just show you things like, hey, you know, what's the difference between West Germany and East Germany? You know, can we look at their systems? Yeah, we can. So Father's Day for me is a time to think about, you know, my own father, obviously, and it's also a time to think about the children that I have. I have 5 children, 4 boys, 1 girl. And it's been a good run with those guys. And so I look forward to the time when we can all sit down, all of us together in the church, and we can say, what's really meaningful here? What can we do together that's going to make a difference in the community's life? What can we do? I do think there are just so many different things. I don't want to end. And so I want to end on the idea that, you know, the good, bad, and the ugly all fit together. And that's the point. You know, there's nothing that's ever completely good. There's nothing that's ever completely bad, as the philosophers say. And there's nothing and no one who's completely ugly. They keep it all together. If we can keep it all together, we can open ourselves up to the possibilities of the Corinthians. We can think about things. We can enjoy things. We can enjoy each other. And we can show that affection and love to the community. Then I think Father's Day will continue to be a wonderful time for everyone, including fathers. So I wish you fathers here all the best. I wish you mothers here, thank God you supported your fathers, the fathers of your children, probably. And I hope nobody ever kicked their kids out. If you did, give me a call. You know, if you're still working on that one, give me a call. I'd love to talk with you, and we can make some adjustments. I'm sure. Amen.